projection that someone on DCCR creative team actually created for us that starts with live action reference, and then Aurora turns into a sketch, and then into final animation, and then she twirls and turns our logo on as well. So something really fun here to get you started.
Always pushing themselves to learn and try new things. Disney artists
We're really excited to work with our creative video team to get something like that created. So we enter our exhibit. We have, of course, just a lovely main text panel, which basically just begins by explaining what live action reference is. A lot of kids especially don't actually know that their favorite characters were used some kind of real life human or animal reference to really create the final character, and that's really what adds kind of the depth, the personality, the things you gravitate toward, and makes you fall in love with our various characters. We're going to begin. Behind me is our prologue video that we had created. So in case you're not much of a reader, we also wanted to have a visual representation of what live action reference is. So the video is going to begin momentarily. If you guys want to kind of gather around
the magic starts
and get a nice little introduction.
Animation might seem like magic, but can you believe that an entire film, like Walt Disney's Cinderella, was conjured up with just pencil and paper? Real-life magic makers called animators create a series of drawings, each one slightly different from the last, sometimes thousands for just a few seconds on screen. Film the drawings one by one, and something magical happens. The drawings come to life. But how did Disney artists make the characters we know and love feel so real? Like all artists, animators draw from life, sparking their imaginations with live performers to help create the illusion of life. Capturing life, creating character, the art of live-action reference provides a behind-the-scenes look at the live actors who pose and perform loosely, moving every which way. But that all changed in preparing for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Before then, animation mostly amounted to short cartoons filled with imaginary creatures and animals, so audiences didn't mind the stiff, exaggerated movement. But as the studio prepared for Snow White and began working with human characters, it became clear that the classic rubber hose style just didn't work. Walt Disney knew that his artists needed something real to build from, bringing in dancer Marge Belcher to model for Snow White. Her performance helped shape a character who felt natural and believable. From there, artists explored ways to get the most out of reference.
The problem is to get away from the static drawing and make that drawing a part of emotion. We would then photograph people going through acting. Then we would study it.
Always pushing themselves to learn and try new things, Disney artists kept finding new ways to move the art form forward. As you explore these galleries, observe the artistry behind them and meet the performers, the actors, dancers, models, and everyday people whose movement and personality inspired the characters we love. Because the animators who created them didn't just draw from imagination. They looked to the world around them and saw not just life, but the possibility of magic. Now, it's your turn. Step inside and discover how movement becomes art. How a single leap becomes the moment Peter Pan takes flight. How a simple table becomes a mad tea party. How a swirling costume becomes a princess gown destined for silver screen and immortality. The magic starts here.
Hooray! Okay, so with that, we can step on into the exhibition. We wanted to start with our prologue area that kind of grounds you within the creative process of where live action reference generally fits in. So we kind of go into from our story, which has our script, our concept art, storyboarding, character development, and then with the character development, a lot of times comes the live action reference. So here we kind of have broken down vaguely into the galleries you're about to see. So costume, movement, and then setting the scene. From there, we then get into more of the animation, which is the rough animation, cleanup, ink and paint, and then we get to our final film. So that kind of, now that we're grounded, we can kind of enter into our first phase. action reference utilized a lot of really beautiful costumes. And these costumes were designed for a few different reasons. One, it let the character that was performing really get into that character to understand who they are and enhance their performance. But also, a lot of times these costumes were modeled very closely to what they would be on screen, because then the animators could see how fabric moves. Because yes, live action reference is for seeing how a human moves, but also what they're wearing and the weight of the fabric also enhances the performance, because fabric is really difficult to actually animate. So a lot of times they would get those key movements, elements of how a fabric kind of tucks or how it bunches, how it moves, if it floats, the speed of that. All those different elements all are really helpful for animators. So if we step on in, we can see lots of lovely photography here on our gallery wall of kind of various costumed characters performing live action reference over time. Of course, we have Eleanor Audley here as Maleficent, which some lovely pieces and also an original cell to be kind of next to it. Throughout the exhibition, you'll see over 60 framed images, but we also have original artifacts, we have original artwork, we have original costume pieces like the two you just saw. Actually, I'm sorry, let's backtrack for 2 seconds. I realized I skipped right over two of the most important pieces in the whole gallery. Here we actually have two original costume pieces worn by live action reference performers. So like the video said, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, it was the first feature-length animated feature. So with that, they really wanted to make sure to get the human animation correct, because before that it was like Goddess of Spring was kind of the tester, and she had kind of like what they call spaghetti arms or rubber hose animation, where there's not a whole lot of like articulation and it doesn't feel very believable. It's very fun, but it's nothing that really captivates you and you connect with the character. So with Snow White, they knew they needed to bring in a live action reference performer to really make sure they get those movements proper. So they brought in Marge Belcher, who was a dancer, and they had her wear a costume, and this is actually the original bodice that she wore, which is really, really spectacular. We also have here the costume that was worn by Dickie Jones for the live action reference of Pinocchio. So these are actually some of the oldest costumes we even have in the archives collection. And it's really funny that a lot of people see them and they're like, but it was an animated film. And it's like, yeah, but they went into an incredible amount of detail to make sure the costumes match the animation, just to get those details right. Okay, now we can go back around the corner. So I mentioned we like to add a lot of different elements to this exhibition. One for fun, two for kind of education, so people can get a grasp of what we're trying to teach you about animation here. So when it comes to costume, like I said, fabric moves in a lot of different ways. So if you're looking at something like Alice as she's falling down the rabbit hole, her skirt kind of falls up, flops up. And this is a very light fabric, so it's very delicate, very quick in motion. If you look at something like a spin or a twirl, if you have something that's a little bit more of a tight silhouette, you're not going to get a whole lot of motion down here, but if you have a wide bell sleeve, you might get some flare out there or some ribbon elements. If you're looking at an action like you're running, you get kind of a side-to-side action. And if you're looking at an outfit that has more of a structure, like if it's got like a hoop skirt that's more structured, you're getting kind of like a bell movement. So we really wanted to kind of bring these elements to life so everybody can understand really what you're capturing and what an animator would be studying to really capture those movement pieces. So in our center, we also just have different questions. So as you're interacting, you can see like, watch the fabric as it moves. What do you notice? Like observe like an animator. Do you see how the fabric bunches, how it moves, how it swings? What's the difference between a fabric that's heavier like this versus something that's a little bit lighter? And then of course we have another ball gown that twirls, just like Cinderella, who is right behind us on the wall. So really fun, interactive, that we really wanted to make it look like Alice is falling down the rabbit hole. And from Cinderella, behind you, you will see a lovely graphic that we have here that transforms from live action reference into sketch, and then the final twirl of Cinderella that you see on screen. As we continue our Cinderella journey, we have some beautiful photography of Cinderella live action reference, as well as her journey to the ball with the fairy godmother, and then of course our lovely stepsisters. We also have additional costumes on display from a more modern title. These are from Pocahontas and John Smith. And this really also shows, you can see that the weight of this material moves very differently than anything you might see that's a little bit more flowy. It's more tight to the body, and that more suede-esque material is quite a bit heavier. So the costumes are really they're perfect and really needed to help really bring the characters to life. Throughout the exhibition, we also have these really beautiful kiosks. They're kind of just deep dives into various stories. So this one goes into the creation of the costume of Briar Rose, also known as Aurora, also known as Sleeping Beauty, whichever name speaks to you. But when they were creating her costume in animation, they didn't really know what it was going to be. So animator Mark Davis worked with his wife Alice Davis to actually fabricate the costume that the live-action reference performer wore. So they kind of worked simultaneously to design that character's costume, and then the live-action reference happened to then speak to the animation and the final product. So it's a really lovely story, and it came out to be a beautiful character and a wonderful costume. Throughout the exhibition too, we have various QR codes because we do have a few spots that have audio guide components. So whether somebody wants to come, do a quick zip around, play with the interactives and get high level learning, or if they want to spend a good amount of time to really deep dive into various subjects, we have the audio guide as well. So some fun pieces for people to explore. And you might have noticed too, as you first kind of enter down the hallway, we have kind of this representation too of an animator desk, because really when it comes to anything in the world of animation, but also live action reference, the heart of it is the animator themselves. They're really the ones that utilize this, whether it's reference for them just to gain knowledge of how things move, or if it's them to do live sketching or them doing research on various components. It all kind of comes back to the animator in those individual sketches that brings the character to life. We also, in this case, to go with it, so we have our entrances very much Pinocchio based. So we had our live action reference costume, our text panel here, and then we continue the Pinocchio journey with this case. We have some early character development, and then we also have some story sketches, all from the same kind of sequence that then correspond to a cutting continuity and memo that kind of take the sequence of Geppetto and Pinocchio reuniting over the monster of the whale sequence and then the tuna. So some really fun and some beautiful original artwork as well. If you can follow me this way, we're going to move to our next gallery, which is movement and expression.
In their world, it really felt like, oh, you guys are in charge of this.
Lovely to meet you. Circle back around. So now we're entering into movement and expressions, and this is really kind of the core of what live action reference is capturing, right? You want to make sure to get the movement correct. And how movement is kind of, we wanted to dissect it in a few different ways. So half our gallery is really focused on like animals, and then half on more of the human movement. But we wanted to take it a little bit more granular because we really wanted to understand different types of movement, because if you're moving just like normal walking or whatever, that's one kind of style of what you're doing. But if you're dancing, there's a tremendous more amount of fluidity of what you're doing. And based on what type of dance that might be, the way your joints articulate, the way you move from head to toe, there's some kind of movement going on that can be captured. Or if we're looking at something like more imaginary movement, so let's talk about your flying, for example, with Peter Pan. It's a little bit more tricky to emulate that, so they had to get crafty with their live action reference of, okay, we'll have you lean against these boxes and we'll get the top portion as you're flying. But then, if you're going to jump or leap, how does your body interact mid-air? So it's a really fun kind of case study of different movements and how your body interacts is very different, so they really need that reality to base everything on. Here we have a photo of Bela Lugosi. This was actually for live action reference of Chernabog from Fantasia. So this is a really beautiful photograph, but then to accompany that, we also have these original art pieces. These are miniature story sketches that correlate to that sequence with Chernabog. And these are really, really stunning. They're actually done on black paper, and you can see all the individual strokes of the pencil and some paint as well. But the detail in the tiny different pieces is some of my favorite artwork that we have in our entire archives collection. If we continue on, you'll also see here we have a little magic frame that goes from photograph to bringing it to life with Aurora again here, doing some live action reference. I was talking about dance. Like, dance is very different motion, and catching those movements and those in-between elements when you have that fluidity is really difficult to capture. So we wanted to make a little kind of dance studio moment for our guests to get to join into the world of live action reference performer. So we have our different of our fun characters and saying, okay, well, if you're gonna hula with Lilo and Stitch, how do you move? Versus dancing with Powerline or doing some ballet. There's a different kind of weight distribution, you have different posture, different ways your body moves. So we wanted to kind of give some fun prompts that you can kind of join in. And opposite that, we have kind of pantomiming. So yes, you're capturing movement of the whole body, but also there's a lot of intricacies that you're also trying to capture. So pantomime, a lot of times is really about capturing like facial movement. So here we have Hans Conright, who did the live action reference for Captain Hook, who's also the voice actor behind it. But if you really zoom in, animators use a lot of his facial expressions to capture, to bring Captain Hook to life. Because you think about Captain Hook, he's very over the top, but there's that really thin line of, if you just did it from all imagination, it might not have been believable, but because they used a real actor to really capture those facial movements, it added some authenticity. So yes, he's still extravagant, he's still a little over the top, but it's still very believable. And the same thing, we have some mirrors here for you to kind of get into the action of like, okay, well, if you're interacting with a crocodile and you're Captain Hook, how do you feel? What does your face look like? Or if you're just talking to Tinkerbell calmly, or if it's your nemesis, Peter Pan, your face is going to be very different based on who you're interacting with. So, some fun prompts there. And our gallery kind of comes together on this center wall where we kind of have humans meet animals. So, and that really, that core point is Fantasia. So Fantasia is really special because a lot of times you see dancing animals, so you might have Hyacinth Hippo or Ben Alligator, or the elephants doing all these beautiful dances. But for reference, humans were utilized as choreographed dancers, but also animals were utilized. So it's kind of that beautiful marriage of humans meet animals meets Fantasia. And we also made a really fun kind of scenic movement video here that lets you just see different pieces of motion, whether it's kind of marching, if it's joining in the tea party, if it's dancing, if it's jumping, if it's leaping. We wanted just a really fun kinetic piece to kind of bring the movement to life. My favorite personally is Mama Odie, of course. Love Princess and the Frog. But when you see like the animated versions of the characters, you can see the direct correlation with the live action reference performer and what they add to it. The whole point of when you're watching an animated film is that you really want to get lost, right? You want to forget that you're watching animation. You want to get lost in the story. You want to just see characters. You want to see what's happening and just be lost in it. And live action reference really is that kind of authenticity that adds to it. Especially when it's something like Lilo and Stitch. If you were just to animate hula from imagination, it wouldn't feel as grounded, it wouldn't feel as authentic. Especially when you're going from the phase back and forth, you can really see some of those key moments of articulation in the match. Would you like to watch the whole thing? we can keep the tour going. So in the center here, you'll also see another one of our really fun interactives. And this is to let you kind of look at the difference of articulation points between a human and then different animals. So we have some fun dogs and we have a horse. And we have different character poses in the middle. So this is really for all guests to kind of be like, okay, taking an animator's model of a character and looking at, okay, well, if a horse is doing something, it's very different than if a dog is. We have different articulation points, their size is much different, it's a lot of different motion going on. So it's just something fun to kind of play with and getting to recreate poses, whether it's a human form or a different animal piece. We also have a really beautiful print here, and this is action analysis of different animals during the creation of Bambi. So inside, you'll see various sketches that were created using live action reference of deer. And they go from something that looks pretty close to the doe you might see on screen, some just natural posing, to then you get more into like the different skeletal system. So when they were creating Bambi especially, Rico Lebrun really went as detailed as starting with a skeletal system, and then what does the muscular system look like? And then taking that, and then what do the different poses articulating look like? Different actions of like leaping. This one's really special too because it's like the correlation of a frog leaping versus a deer leaping, and how much detailed research went into making sure to understand how everything, how all the different elements of a deer's body interacts. So a lot of times animators do that research just so they can understand the basis of the motion, because then it really helps too, that it like sinks into their brain of the learning of how movement, how it's created. So now we're to the more animal side of the exhibition. So we start with our Fantasia pieces that merge the two together. Then we get into just various films. We have Sleeping Beauty here with Samson the horse. We've got some fun pieces from Dumbo, Peculiar Penguins with a little Mickey cameo there. Here we have Beauty and the Beast. We've also got The Rescuers Down Under. And then for more recent titles, we have Moana and also Frozen. So even to this day, animators are constantly using live action reference. And a lot of times they work with various animal programs to actually bring them to the studio lot to do some different live sketching. So these are two examples where they actually were able to bring a pig or a reindeer to the studio for animators to have a live drawing class, which was really cool. A lot of times though, especially modern days, they might go to a zoo to research different animals, or whether it's Disney Animal Kingdom, or a lot of times going on full-on research trips to various places around the world to see animals acting in their environments as well. Because when you look at an animal, they do interact quite differently when you're studying them up close versus just in the wild. So there's lots of different pieces to kind of capture and gather from all the different experiences. Over in this corner, we have a little bit more of a deep dive here on animal studies. And here we kind of go into Lion King versus Bambi and how different animals move. And we also have some pieces on Zootopia as well, because Zootopia had a lot of different animals that they had to figure out how to capture them and also figure out their scale versus their articulation, how they move. So a really beautiful piece here as well.
Small, and these animals keep walking out, and people just think they just pick up the most.
Our next gallery is setting the scene. So another big component, oh, actually, I will pause for one moment. I'm sorry. Somebody needs to look at it. No worries. I also forgot to mention, once we're done with the tour too, if you guys want to come back through, you're welcome to take all the time you need to capture anything or read anything. I love when people like to read the text panel, so please, you'll have all the time in the world too. Cool.
Thank you for that. I'm just doing audio and I'm trying to stay out of your guys' videos, but you're all filming different things, so I'm trying to like stay behind you, but sorry if I'm ruining your video. You're good.
So our next gallery is setting the scene. So this is another huge component, especially of early live action reference. A lot of times they would actually build full sets on sound stages to recreate something if there was something particular they needed to capture in terms of like sizing or scale. So a perfect example of that is our friend Tinkerbell. So Tinkerbell is the size of a fairy, which is really difficult when you're working with a film that's got a lot of full live action or full human sized characters. So then it's like, okay, well, how do you make Tinkerbell small and make her interact with the world. So here we actually have her original slippers that were worn by Margaret Carey during live action reference, which are really special. And then we have a few different photography pieces and an original Tinkerbell story sketch there as well. But you might have noticed the elephant in the room behind me. We have a really fun photo op that is of Tinkerbell's scissors. So this is pretty spot on. If you look behind our scissors, you'll see a photograph of Margaret Carey utilizing oversized scissors. And this was incredible, one, for Margaret to perform as a fairy. There's nothing that makes you feel like you're a very small character than being next to ginormous scissors. But also, it was really great for the animators to understand the scale that they were working with, right? So if she's this small and this is how big scissors are, it helped them ground everything she interacted with of how she might work as a fairy in total. So whether you want to now or come back later, be sure to take a picture with our beautiful oversized scissors. Like I said, they're some of my favorite pieces in the exhibit. Other than that, you can kind of come back around this way. You'll see a different photograph, additional photography of various scenes that might have been created, whether it's props or a full-on set. So something like Cinderella, it's not always a fully built-out piece. Sometimes it's more scaffolding. So like when she's carrying all the dishes and trays down the stairs, they built actual stairs for her to travel down. Or if we're looking at the stepsisters here, a piano and some flutes or music stands kind of add that scale to place them in. So a lot of times it might be smaller props that are also created for them to interact with. Geppetto, we have a workbench with a Pinocchio puppet. And even my favorite is the little Cleo bowl next to him. It's a little rudimentary, but it also kind of still gets the point across. If you're a 101 Dalmatians fan, of course our nanny had a day here, but you can see all the various props to really kind of bring this one to life as well. Or sometimes if they're holding a pet or character, they might have just a prop that is like a stuffed Duchess here from Aristocats. A few other pieces. Tinkerbell is really the perfect example of interacting with all these props because they built so many wonderful things for them to interact with. So here we have Tinkerbell going through the keyhole. And Peter Pan in general just had some really beautiful photography interacting with sets. Whether it's Peter Pan and Hook on the top of a ship, or a small ship here with Captain Hook kind of sailing away. And a lot of times you can actually see the people that are operating the boat. So to actually make the boat move, they had an apparatus that would actually make it as if they were in the waves. It's this kind of photography that you don't, sometimes we have records in the archives of what was going on. Live action reference might have been scripted, we might have some details, but photography, what did they say, a photograph is worth a million words. So getting to see it and getting to see people that created the props or that are kind of making them interact or move is also incredible. We're now transitioning into our final gallery, and with that transition, we kind of get into Alice in Wonderland a little bit. So whether it's Alice kind of sitting on a tree, or Alice being stuck in the capsule here, or when she's getting almost arrested by the Queen's army. But if you look behind you, our next kind of photo moment is taking us into our final gallery, which brings us kind of everything full circle. And this takes half the table is live action reference, and the other half is full animation. So you're able to kind of take a seat at the Mad Tea Party and be a live action reference performer next to the March Hare and the Mad Hatter. So it's kind of fun to take the 2D or the 3D into the 2D. And we also have some beautiful photography over here. One that you can see what our reference is. So here you can see a beautiful photograph of the Mad Tea Party live action reference. And then we also have this lovely photograph of Catherine Beaumont in a scaffolding of a house as if she is oversized Alice. It's one of my favorite pieces I think they built out. It's just really, really fun. she got to play with scale a lot in the creation of Alice in Wonderland. Over on this side of the gallery, to also really help us get full circle of the animation process, we have these beautiful frames that kind of hit our various themes that we also explored. So if we're looking at something like here, we have an original story sketch of Captain Hook with the crocodile. Then we have live action reference, and then into the final frame. So you can kind of see the correlation. But we try to make them always in the order of the sequence that they would have actually arrived at in the world. So here we have live action reference of Cinderella and the Prince. Then we have a cell, and then we have the final animation. So we wanted to kind of take different elements of our original art from our collection and kind of place them within the pipeline with live action reference. Here we have a story sketch that was done during the time of Bambi. Then we have our live action reference here with the deer on the studio lot, and then our final. And then probably my favorite of them is here we have a story sketch that is of the scene of Bellinote during Lady and the Tramp. We have the lovely live action reference where they are singing to Pluto, of course, and then the final frame. Our final kiosk here is reel to reel, and this is really, like I said, this is bringing it all kind of full circle, and this is looking at live action reference from where it started to where we currently are with more in the world of Zootopia 2. So you can see, even, like I said, sometimes animators might use something as simple as a mirror or videotape themselves doing an action and use themselves as reference, or sometimes they can just research videos online, but they still also go out and recreate pieces because sometimes you need a very specific piece of movement that you need to capture. So live action reference is always very important.
Sometimes it's hard to separate and share.
And our final interactive piece we have here are these film strips. So these are all magnetized, and it lets our guests kind of put 4 different sequences in order. So you can put 4 of the live action reference and put 4 of the animation. You can line it up, you can flip it upside down. There is technically a right answer, but it's kind of just a brain jogger to be like, okay, this is something that's not quite right. Okay, if she's doing this, and so it's just a fun piece for guests to kind of interact with animation and live action reference. And it lets you explore Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, and also a piece from Encanto as well. The final element that we have of our exhibition is a theater space where we have a video that's under the scene, which is a kind of an all-encompassing video package that lets you see live action reference from the earliest days of the studio through the lens of The Little Mermaid. Wise. If you want to follow me, that actually brings us to the end of our tour.
Animation might seem like magic, but can you believe that an entire film like Walt Disney's Cinderella was conjured up with just pencil and paper?
We did
Real
a whole
life
loop.
magic